this point, and the first thing that we have two sets of minutes to look at tonight. And the first one is for December 8th, 2020. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve it with amendments and changes as noted.
Is there a second?
I will second.
And we'll go to page 1. And page 2. Page 3. I said.
Clear myself up in a minute.
Okay, we're just doing the minutes of December 8th at this moment. I had one question under the Finance and Treasurer's report, and it mentioned the budget includes money for community partnerships, and it mentioned a town bank. And I'm not familiar with that. Masonic Temple, yes. Lake Huron, yes, but the town bank, I don't know.
I believe that should be the town band.
Yes.
We won't get in the banking business.
What a way to sneak that in.
Yeah.
And page 4. Hearing no other corrections, then all those in favor of approving the minutes of December 8th, 2020, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, and Ted just joined. And 4. So now we're on the minutes of December 15th, 2020, and looking for a motion to approve those minutes.
Move we approve subject to modification.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Page 1. Page 2. And page 3. Hearing no corrections, then all those in favor of approving the minutes of December 15th, 2020, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've done it. Unanimous on both. We're at public comment now, and I believe we have at least one person who wishes to make public comment.
Yep, Terry, I have Timothy Fair that I'll get connected in just a moment here. And anyone else listening at home, if you'd like to make a public comment during this portion of the meeting, please let me know in the chat or by raising your hand. And if you are on for the public hearing on the FY22 budget, that's scheduled for 8 p.m. So Tim Fair, I'll get you connected here in just a moment. Hi, Tim, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Thanks for appearing tonight. And
thank you very much.
We have received your letter, and if you'd like to speak on that, go right ahead.
Of course. I just want to thank the select board for giving me the chance to speak. I was half expecting video. I'm so used to the video Zoom conferences, so I'm a little bit thrown, but I do want to thank you all very much for the time. I'm a resident of Williston. My name is Timothy Fair, as you gathered from my letter. I'm sure, and I've watched a few select board meetings, this is an issue that has been discussed. And now at this point, formally bringing the request to the select board, as Act 164 requires, for cannabis retail does need to be affirmatively opted in by the registered voters of every community here in the state of Vermont. The town meeting is an excellent opportunity, in my opinion, where we will most likely get the largest amount of community members, and we'd get a most accurate vote about how the community feels about potentially having retail cannabis establishments within Williston. So I would formally request that the select board place this article as written in the letter provided on the warning for the town meeting. And I'd further ask that the signature requirement be waived for the general voter petition, given the COVID emergency. I'm happy to go door to door to collect signatures for this, but I don't think that's a real smart idea right now, especially given the viable option of the select board being able to place this item on the agenda for town meeting on their own without the requirement of the signatures.
Good, thank you. We'll be discussing this, the operations of how this is going to work next on the, or two sections down on the agenda. And I'm not sure we'll have an answer tonight, but we will should have an answer by next week as far as the signatures are required. I had just two questions for you. I presume, even though this is coming on your letterhead, that it's only on behalf of yourself, not for a client?
No, this is definitely not on behalf of any client. Had it been, I would have certainly disclosed that. The letterhead, I was at work today, had that. This is on behalf of both myself and my partner. Now, I'm not going to, hide the ball. I do have a vested interest. I own a cannabis law firm and consulting firm, but this is not on behalf of any particular client, nor am I aware of any plan for. I just believe this is the best for Williston. I believe it is the best for Vermont. I have a lot of reasons why I believe that. I know there's been some skepticism on part of the select board member, and I would like to throw out, I am more than willing to appear to talk about this, about why I feel that this is a benefit to both Williston and the state. There is no zero sums in life. Nothing is all good or all bad. And I am willing to be perfectly honest about, the 3 years I've spent in this industry, about what I have seen being the good and the bad. But when I've weighed them, I do believe this is what is right for Williston, which is why I'm bringing this, both as an attorney and as a resident of the town, member of the community.
Good, thank you. The second question I had was the statute allows to have a vote to allow licensed retailers and integrated licensees. And I noticed that the integrated licensees are not in your request.
I felt it was just doubling up licensed cannabis retailers, whether they're retailing under a license granted for the retail license or whether they're, selling under the integrated license, really comes down to the same thing. It's licensed cannabis retail. So that would include both integrated licenses and private standalone retail licenses.
Good, thank you. Any other questions from the board at this time?
No, just two things. I just would kind of like to emphasize one. I'm aware everyone might not agree with this, but I do believe that the spirit of Act 164 is that this is a decision meant to be made by the members of the community. If the members of the community wish to have this, I believe we should. And if the members of the community say no, we shouldn't, then I would respect that as well. But I would ask that the select board grant the opportunity for the people and the community to make this decision. I would also like to say, I think a lot of the fears that surround this, I think a lot of the concerns that surround this, I think there's a lot of answers to those. And again, I would just like to reiterate my offer. If the select board is ever interested in taking some time, I would be happy to appear, whether Zoom or however, and kind of maybe answer some questions that maybe some of the select board might have. I will say, I have now been working in this industry for 3 full years. This is my full-time job. This is my business that I now own. I'm intimately familiar. I've been asked and invited to speak across the country on the topic of cannabis law and cannabis policy. And I would be very happy to share any of my knowledge with the select board or answer any questions at any time that you might have.
Good, thank you very much. And we'll be taking this up next week.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Moving on then to the dispatch operations and planning report. Eric, is Gary Taylor on the line?
Yep, I'm going to connect him and the chiefs, and I'll give a brief introduction before we get started, Terry.
Yes, please.
Actually, I think I'm going to have. Gary was connected, but I think he may be calling in. We had some tech issues with a meeting before, so I'm hoping I'm connecting someone on the phone here, and that's Gary. But we'll find out here if it's not. I'll disconnect this individual. No, I don't see that person. Let's see. Hi, Chiefs. I'm just looking for Gary to get reconnected here. That phone number disappeared after I tried to connect it, so I think we'll just. Okay, I think this may be him again.
Hello.
Hey, is this Gary?
I'm sorry, I can see all of you on Zoom, but I can't seem to talk to you.
We can hear you now, Gary. I'm glad we did the phone backup option here.
All right, thank
Hear
you.
you loud and clear. Thank you.
So Eric's going to give a short introduction of the subject because he wrote us a memo, and then we'll go directly to Gary, and welcome to the fire chief and police chief.
Thank you.
So just to kind of kick things off here, last fall, the select board received a request from the Chittenden County Public Safety Authority Board of Directors for funds for building upfit costs for a regional dispatch facility in South Burlington on Gregory Drive above the police station. And this is the next stage in developing an operational dispatch center for municipalities to contract with for dispatch services that's been discussed for a few years now. Based on the funding formula among CCPSA member communities used to date, the request to Williston is $34,000 or 10% of the estimating building upfit cost for this stage in development. Last fall, the select board was in consensus to look at this funding request in conjunction with the FY22 budget process. In order to aid staff and the board in evaluating and considering the town's long-term options for emergency dispatch, among them regional, I tasked a consultant, retired Chief Gary Taylor, with evaluating the town's current dispatch system and the options for the town to consider moving forward. You'll see from Chief Taylor's bio, he's served a number of public safety roles in his career, among them police and fire chief, dispatch center supervisor, and a member of the state's E911 board. I provided the board with a written copy of the report. It's a little bit of length to it with the work that Gary put in for us. And this evening, I've asked the chief to join us along with our chiefs, Foley and Collette, to discuss our emergency dispatch options moving ahead. So I'll turn things over to Chief Taylor to walk through a number of topics and leave a good portion for discussion at the end. And I know we intend for this to be kind of discussion as we go as well for the board. So Chief Taylor, I'll turn this over to you. And I believe the first section you were going to speak to was looking at the current dispatch structure and some challenges that Williston faces.
Can you hear me all right now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. The greatest vulnerabilities that you have working against you are the fact that you have kind of a fragmented dispatching system. And that's because Shell Dispatch provides dispatching services for the fire department, which includes EMS. And the police department runs their own dispatch during the day for 12 hours a day, as I understand it. And after talking to people, I think I'm correct. And then 12 hours a day, the Vermont State Police provide dispatching services. So the fly in that ointment is that you really are, you have two different PSAT centers. So state police, Williston Barracks, is the 911 Chittenden County PSAP Center, along with Shelburne Dispatch. They are also the 911 PSAP. So when a call comes in, a 911 call that's fire-related, fire or a rescue call, that gets rolled down to the Shelburne Dispatch, and Shelburne dispatches the fire department and is their communications link for that call. If the call is for something other than fire and rescue, then the call during the day or during the times that dispatch is staffed by Williston is rolled down to the police department and they dispatch it themselves. If it happens at night, then the state police automatically dispatch that call. You probably are aware that the state police for a long time have been looking at charging for providing services. The preferred operations are that they would provide dispatching for state entities, themselves as state entities, and not for everybody as a default dispatch center. So they are still working with a fee schedule, which is a little bit unclear. And there are some issues because of COVID-19 that it was supposed to take effect on July 1st, 2021. I'm not sure if that's going to get pushed back at this time. It's likely to, but at the same time, I think that means that Williston will be expected to start paying for the dispatching they receive from the state police. The other thing is because the state police operate on a CAD RMS system called Spillman, which they have proprietary control of here in Vermont for emergency services, they really dictate. They're the tail that wags the dog for Williston. You don't have a choice of selecting Belcor, which is an alternative CAD RMS system that's used by emergency responders, at least not during the time that they are dispatching you, because they operate on Spillman. So that's the real crisis. It's really a vulnerability. If you think back about the big train crash, the Amtrak crash, and all the 911 calls that were coming in, if there's going to be any potential for calls to get mixed up, messed up, communications to go sideways, that's probably when and how it would come. It's tough enough when you have one primary PSAP, because even in those cases, some of those calls get rolled to another dispatch or PSAP center. And I tried to provide you in the report with the difference between 911 call taking and dispatching. Suffice to say that 911 call taking is all about the caller and the crisis. And dispatching is all about the first responders and being their link when they go out on calls, and making sure that you can send the right services to the right location for the right reasons. And sometimes, that includes multi-jurisdiction or multi-disciplines. It could include the fire, rescue, and police at the same call. Probably does on a frequent basis. But anyways, that's the vulnerability that you face. You're also kind of held hostage by the fact that you get what you get. So whatever Shelburne is using for CAD RMS, you're going to have that as your CAD RMS system. I know in talking with Chief Collette, he has some desires for a broader CAD RMS system that is much more efficient and effective and does automatic NIFRS reporting, or has the ability to prepare reports that are NIFRS ready. Is that correct, Chief?
Yeah, that's mostly correct, Chief. Right now, Shelburne Dispatch has to use the CAD RMS that Vermont State Police does. They don't have a choice in that. So, and we cannot make any alterations to that without approval of DPS. And right now they're in the middle of a request for proposal on that. So we cannot alter anything. So we want to improve our capability here, and we really are a tertiary or later party, and we don't have a vote.
Right. Yeah, and I think the chief is absolutely correct. And Williston, I'm from the area. I grew up in the area. Williston's one of the fastest growing communities that I'm aware of in the state. You certainly come a long ways from the days of pasture lands along the interstate. And every time I'm over there, I am amazed at how much activity is occurring and how many visitors you have. Not to say that you don't have a lot of residential development going on too, but certainly you have a large population of both residents and employees working in the area and shoppers and the full gamut. So I think it's important for you to have some control over your destiny. And the only way that you're going to do that is to make some decisions early on. And I don't want to belabor anything, but I would tell you that this single dispatch tends to provide a more streamlined dispatch services because everybody knows what everybody else is doing. That's not to say that you shouldn't or couldn't have separate CAD RMS systems running in the same dispatch center. But it does streamline what's being said, what's going on, who's where, and what they're doing. I think that this is the appropriate time for you to make those decisions. I've tried to provide you with some options, including just staying the way you are, which I'm not sure is really a very healthy or progressive way to go. But I also included some numbers in that. Those numbers can be refined better. But I didn't start calling people to price out equipment because I think that that's for another time. But I did give you some approximations that are in the ballpark, I'm sure of that. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention that coming up is P25, which is a congressional federal regulation that says all emergency services have to be on digital narrowband frequencies by 2025. Almost everybody has either tried to avoid the extra expenses associated with doing that. Williston's uniquely positioned that their radios that have been purchased are all compatible, mostly all compatible. There are some in the fire service that are not. They're older radios, but that's a costly venture in and of itself. Is an example I would tell you that you can buy an analog radio for somewhere between $400 and $1,000, and a digital radio is somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000, depending on its capabilities. I think you're in good shape there.
Terry, one thing, if you'd like, Gary could walk the board and those listening through kind of these 5 options he's identified and some kind of pros and cons to look at each. Would you like him to walk through that?
Yeah, so I was just going to ask him to do, so yes.
Okay, I'm moving there now. I'm flipping through my paperwork. So option 1 would be to remain the way you are. And let me see, you can see from the documents that I provided you, should have been a little better prepared to have this laid out. I apologize for that.
Page 28.
Got it. Thank you. So option 1, you will see the negative part of that is Chief Collette's concerns regarding MBTs and CAD RMS and trunk communications are really not being addressed at all with the existing system, at least not satisfactorily. It leaves the community a little fragmented because his dispatching is coming from Shelburne, and the police departments is coming from the police department and or the state police. And you don't receive, the fire service does not receive full service dispatching. They receive what Shelburne is prepared to offer, I guess. So really what they're getting is alerting and dispatching services, but much of their communications is really between them. And again, Chief Klett, if I'm in error, please feel free to correct me. I think I'm absolutely right about that. The police department's a little more uniquely situated, and at least for 12 hours a day, they have some control over their dispatching services, and they get full services. And I want to explain the difference to you between full service and a partial service. So, for example, what state police provide for dispatching is they will alert or roll down a call, and then you're kind of on your own. So if they were dispatching your fire department would be toned and dispatched, and then they would kind of go away. Full service is what they call cradle to the grave. Basically, the dispatch service that you have for your responding emergency personnel. Those dispatch services stay with those officers, those firefighters, those rescue people until they put that vehicle back in service and they say, we're back in service. So they go, so in a single stage dispatch center, the 911 call comes into the same center that's going to dispatch the emergency services. And in almost all cases, the caller is going to have the same person on the phone with them until help arrives on the scene. So while that call is being communicated to the dispatcher, he or she can be toning the fire department to alert the rescue squad or the fire personnel. I don't know the exact protocol in the fire department, but they're all fire department personnel. So they're trying to make sure that those people get alerted as early in the process as possible, and then they're staying with those responders until they say we're back in the station and back in service. That's really a big deal for the fire service, where they stretch hoses and nozzles, maybe a deck gun or something. They really have to go back to the station and work to put their equipment back in service so that they're ready to go for the next call. But that happens with full service. That doesn't happen with partial service. The other thing is when the police or the fire department respond to a call and there's a car blocking something, they can, with full service, you can just call in and ask the dispatcher to make arrangements to get the vehicle moved, get it out of the way. If you need roads closed, you can ask the dispatcher to do that. That's not necessarily true when you're receiving partial dispatch services from state police or another entity. So that's option one. And option one really doesn't very adequately address Chief Collett's concerns about the CAD RMS, the MDTs, the mobile data terminals, the GPS, and the ability to prioritize and identify and account for apparatus and equipment and categorize the NIFRS calls. I won't beat that up much. Number two really is creating one single dispatch center. Just want to make sure I'm on the right one here. Reorganize and consolidate Williston emergency services to a single town dispatch center, which is not a bad idea. The reality is that most communities are trying to go with single dispatch provider. I would tell you that I've been on 2 legislative study committees and the governor's study committee, and those committees all found that the most efficient and effective way to manage emergency calls is through a regional or single dispatch center, because it's almost like watching the weather. The dispatch center knows exactly what's going on for your community. They can see where the fire personnel are. They can see if there are rescue personnel out. They can see mutual aid. They can see all of those things, and they have good input from the responders and up-to-date, real-time communications. To do that, however, you would have to spend some money. And part of spending that money is, you know, a new FireCAD RMS system, which you could certainly set that up at one of the consoles that could be dedicated to fire calls, the run cards, the multiple alarm program capability that would be part of the RMS, the CAD system, the pre-fire planning software. All of these things are really important. The multi-agency interoperability, including VHF and UHF trunk systems, shared primary dispatch frequencies with availability of multiple fire ground frequencies. Right now, you kind of rely on, they were actually put aside by the federal government, what we call VTAC and UTAC channels. And VTAC is just VHS and UTAC is UHF. To make this simple, VTAC is traditionally used by fire and rescue people, or VHS, and UHF is used by law enforcement. UHF stands for ultra high frequency. VHF stands for very high frequency. Those are all moving to digital frequencies though. You need to have person down. So most of the equipment now that's being sold out there has the ability to detect if a firefighter or a police officer goes down and there's no movement, it will alarm back to the dispatch center. Proximity dispatching, that's kind of pre-sorted stuff that's provided through the CAD system. CAD stands for Computer Aided Dispatch. RMS stands for your records management system. So it's the ability to call that back. You'd have to do that. I know that the town is working a bit on the possibility of adding a tower, which is a good thing. Regardless of what option you choose, that is a good thing. There are many dead spots in the community. You are not unique. There are dead spots in every community. And you really have to, it's almost like the term community policing, you have to community develop your RF frequency capabilities for your region. It depends on the topography. It depends on low wires and outliers. But you need to pursue that. It looks like you are, and I encourage you to continue to do that. It would probably include having to hire more dispatch personnel, which is listed on the cost sheet. If you look at the end of the options, I tried to prepare a chart for you that's easy to look at and reference. And my best guess is that the first year it would probably cost between $700,000 and $900,000 to stand up that dispatch center. And part of what you have to remember, and I tried to, again, I won't spend a lot of time belaboring this point, but it's explained in the report what the real costs of dispatching are. To make it short and sweet, there are 168 hours in a week. You divide that by 40, and you're going to come up with 4.2. There's no such thing as 0.2. And nobody gets away any longer with not providing benefits to dispatchers. So for a long time in the dispatch business, we figured it took at least 4 full-timers and a cadre of part-timers. The part-timers are much harder to come by now because the training is so much more intensive and long. I wouldn't expect that you're going to do exceptionally well hiring part-time dispatchers. If you're fortunate, you will find a couple of good part-time dispatchers, and I would tell you to hang on to them if you can. But realistically, the national number right now is 6. So if you're looking at a dispatch center and you want to put somebody in a chair 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, it's going to take 6 people to do that with time off for people who either have sick leave or vacation or bereavement. In the state of Vermont, the average dispatcher with benefits makes between $72,000 and $78,000 a year. Math never has been my strong suit, so I try to round things up or down to make it easy to understand. But if you just make it $70,000, you're talking $420,000 in salaries and benefits a year just to staff that. And you haven't bought anybody any pencils, pens, computers, desks, chairs. So obviously some of that you would have and you would be able to use in that center, but those things all cost real money. The radio. So some of the things that you have to take a look at are your repeaters and your trunk lines. The other thing that's really important is security. More and more, we're finding that if you have a tower, you have to protect it. You know, with anti-climb barriers, so nobody can climb that tower and knock out your communications. You have to have generated power or backup power for that. And you want to make sure, because of all the NIBRs, VIBRs, there's a whole bunch of acronyms that I could go on for a long time and they wouldn't mean much to anybody, but to meet the criteria established by those organizations, the FBI, the state of Vermont, DPS, you have to really limit and restrict access to the radios, and the radios are all linked into computers. So when people talk about a dispatch center and they talk only about radios, they're missing half the boat, because all of those radios are being operated through the computers that the dispatchers are sitting behind. So that's my best estimate. After year one, I think you could probably operate that dispatch center for about $500,000 a year. Again, it would depend on salaries and benefits, which is the most expensive part. The radio equipment, a lot of that you're going to have to maintain anyway. And, you know, certainly I would tell you that 8 years, it looks to me, if you do the research, and after being in the business for a long time, we always used 8 years as the life of a piece of electronic equipment. And then you're looking at either replacing it or upgrading it. And again, more and more, you know, RF means radio frequency, and mostly in the state of Vermont, we dispatch from antenna to antenna. It's called stick dispatching. More and more dispatch centers are moving to microwaves. And you're dispatching by microwave or by VoIP, which again includes and involves computers. Option 3 would be going out to contract. So there are dispatch centers sprinkled around the area that do, in fact, provide dispatching services. One of them, you know, I remember when the former chief Jim started doing that, what he was trying to do is create some offset revenue to offset the cost to the town of Shelburne for dispatching services. You know, where I worked for the last 15 years in St. Albans, we did that. And it started off kind of being a by hook, by crook thing. You know, people would come to the PD and say, you know, we're starting a fire department out in Franklin, and we don't have anybody answer the phone 24 hours a day. Would you guys do that? And tone us. And, you know, depending on who was in a good mood or not on a given day, you would pick up additional people to be responsible for. Those days are gone. It costs money to dispatch. So I would tell you that St. Albans, I just retired on the 31st, but we were generating about $1 million a year in dispatch revenue. But the reason that people do that is to offset their own cost. So if you had your own dispatch center, you could always dispatch for another community to generate some offset revenue, but you shouldn't create a dispatch center thinking that you're going to make money dispatching, because for the most part, most municipalities don't want to pay a penny more than they have to. And every time that you explain that you just had union negotiations or some other thing, that's why you have to raise your rent. It suddenly turns into a dispute about actual cost. But anytime that 10 people are paying for somebody to sit in a chair, it's cheaper for all 10 of them than if one person pays. The next, there are many disadvantages to that. One of the things is that you'd have to put out an RFP and you'd have to tell people what it is that you expect or want. For CAD RMS, you're pretty much limited or restricted. to whatever it is that they're using, whatever their system happens to be. I don't think there are a lot of people, there's no growing desire to be in the dispatch business in Chittenden County. Those who are thinking about dispatch for Chittenden County are thinking of a regional dispatch center, which is your fifth option. And quite honestly, one of the most logical and quite possibly one of the most practical, efficient, and effective. The issue will be making sure that all emergency responders get treated properly and that you have the right capabilities for those emergency responders, and that the steering committee or the control mechanism for that understands that it takes real dollars and real people to manage and staff a facility like that. Again, when you look at cost for that, it looks like your initial costs are, I don't know. Again, it takes into consideration the fact that you still have to man some positions back in Williston. But probably you're talking at least $500,000 to get your foot in the door. And after that, maybe $364,000. I think Eric might be able to speak more intelligently to the Chittenden County Regional Dispatch concept than I can. I can tell you that I've supported it. I worked in law enforcement and the fire service and EMS in Chittenden County for 28 years, and it never made sense to me that there are 14 separate police departments and more than that for fire departments, and they all have redundant equipment. They all go out and buy the same equipment and spend a lot of money doing that, when if you put your money together, you'd have more horsepower and you could build one system that would support everybody. Did I cover the options? Okay.
Looks good to me. I think looking at the sheets you provided, you did a good job on giving us the updates on that. So I guess I'll turn it over to the board to ask any questions. We have about 15 minutes. We're probably going to not do the town meeting logistics until after we get through discussing this. But any questions from the board for Chief Taylor?
Not really. Just one observation. I'm on page 37, looking at the dispatch option considerations. And one thing that struck me was, if I look at the one that talks about full dispatch services, which all the options essentially do. And then I go a little bit further down and I look at the row that says increases town overall dispatching cost, and all of them are checked again. So
yeah. The truth of the matter is, if you do anything other than what you're doing right now, you're probably going to spend more money. But that's just one of those things that I think we have to accept. The two things, the one thing I didn't say that I think is really important is you have two in-house experts. You have a fire chief and a police chief who are fully aware of their needs, their wants, and their capabilities. And unlike some communities, I would be remiss in not pointing to them as your resident experts on dispatching. Certainly Chief Collette and Chief Foley both know what it is they need and what they want. And, I realize that if you suddenly want a subatomic car and you try to get one and they aren't available, you're going to have to settle for something less. But the reality is you're not spending a lot of money right now on dispatching. And you are not unique. I can tell you that for 46 years, I've worked in emergency services, and we always planned for dispatch after we got done building everything else. Somebody would say, oh, by the way, where are we going to put dispatch? And somebody would say, that big closet we were going to make downstairs turn it into a locker room, it looks like it's going to become the dispatch center. Nobody ever planned for the dispatch center, up front. nowadays, I think we're a little better at doing those sorts of things. Certainly Chief Collette, with his experience from Burlington, Chief Foley, who I've known for all 46 years of my emergency service career, they're well versed in what they need and what's available. And I'm pretty sure that they would completely agree with me that you're kind of doing it on a shoestring budget right now, which is good for you, but you have to understand that anything that you do to try to become more progressive and modern is probably going to cost more money.
If you were to, out of the 5 options, I think I know the question, but I still want to hear it from somebody who knows more about it than I do, a lot more about it than I do. If we were to look at it from the perspective of what option provides the greatest, increases to the greatest amount, the safety of our police department and fire and EMS departments, which would that option be?
Well, ideally, it would be your own consolidated dispatch center.
Okay, interesting.
If you weren't going to do that, and the likelihood probably is great that you might not, I would certainly consider the Chittenden County Regional Dispatch Center the next most viable option.
How important would you, out of all the considerations we're looking at and you've detailed, how important is that one I just asked about?
It's probably the most important.
Okay.
If I had to prioritize what you have to be taking into consideration right now, I'll tell you that, again, I look around your community and I see this expansive growth and everything from industrial and manufacturing to residential to being a shopping mecca, if you will. Most communities would commit crimes to have the sort of growing grand list that you're probably experiencing. But the time to get a handle on this is now, while you're still growing at that pace, and you'll be in a better position. You'll be on a much more solid foundation moving forward. But the lifeline for those responders is that dispatcher. We sometimes don't think about the unsung heroes in the emergency services business, but it is that dispatcher who makes the difference. And I suspect that your chiefs can tell you that story after story anecdotally about, successes or not successes because of the person on the other end of that radio.
Okay, thank you.
I only had one question, if I could. I'm not sure who to direct this to. Could be any of you. With the regional dispatch, I'm looking at page 35 of the report, and I noticed that it says that one of the negatives listed as a possibility are things like proximity dispatching, regardless of agency, the closest unit is deployed. Now, we have mutual aid agreements where we respond to Richmond or South Burlington or whoever needs us, and they do the same for us. Is this saying that under the regional dispatch that if we have there's a house in Richmond at the bottom of French Hill that's closer to our fire department than the fire department in Richmond, that this regional dispatch will roll our fire truck or our ambulance because it happens to be closer regardless of town line?
I think that's a question for Eric or Chief Collette.
I don't know that it's Ted. I think what we're talking about here is closest proximity dispatch would more often deal with EMS. So if you had an ambulance that was driving by an incident and that would mark it in a GIS system, that CAD is going to look at all of the ambulances that are showing as in service or available. And that's going to say ambulance X is the closest ambulance to respond to that scene as they're driving by. So that's going to recommend that ambulance. So regardless of agency, that's going to put responders on scene quicker. In a fire response, you're going to have a multi-agency response. regardless, because we don't have the staffing or the people. So you're going to get 2 or 3 fire departments. They're going to automatically be dispatched, most likely for a fire of significance, for certainly a commercial building fire or something like that. So it's not necessarily going to apply there. It's going to come down to EMS.
Okay. Well, the fire dispatch, that happens now, right? I mean, if we need help from another department, we can call them.
So how that happens is only the agencies that are dispatched out of Shelburne have the ability to be automatically, if you will, toned out of the Shelburne dispatch. So Heinsberg Fire, Shelburne Fire, Richmond Fire, all are dispatched out of Shelburne. If it's a fire significance, they need to hang up, call the other agency on the telephone, and request assistance. In our case, for a tanker task force and what we would classify as a second alarm building fire, that often will include up to 7 additional phone calls at about 60 seconds apiece. So you do that math.
Yep.
That's 7 minutes before you've even contacted that last agency to try to get to your incident scene. And now you have to dispatch that agency, alert their responders. They have turnout time to get to their respective stations if it's not a staffed station, and then travel time to your event. So you could be looking at 20 minutes or greater before you're going to get another fire department in that model. Where the CCPSA, if it was all coming out of one central dispatch, that's just another tone, another button, and it's all simulcast at the same time. The request for assistance goes out at the same time.
Yep. Well, I don't want to be too parochial about it, but the concern I had was the ambulance dispatch, for as you've described it, that, and again, I'm not going to begrudge anybody who needs an ambulance and say, well, you're in Essex. I wish I could help, but we're the Williston ambulance, and we would never cross that town line. It's a huge wall, almost like the one between Texas and Mexico. But the issue is that, so I mean, I don't have a problem with that, but ultimately there is a secondary concern about, resources that, we spend money for these things, and if other towns are getting them just because we have the same dispatch as opposed to where they genuinely need them, that would cause a concern. It sounds like that's not going to be an issue.
No, I don't think it would be an issue at all. I mean, we actually ran into this in the city of Burlington, Ted, and we divided the city into 2 zones, essentially a north and south. We divided it down Pearl Street. And what would happen is, based upon where the incident mapped, one ambulance would get dispatched. Well, if that other ambulance was happening to travel through that jurisdiction, then it would pick up that ambulance. We were able to program the CAD, and then operationally just members would know it and say, wait a minute, that other truck is right here, and they wouldn't do it. So I don't think it's as big of a deal as you're envisioning it.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it's not.
It's something that happens routinely every day in these systems.
Yeah, I have a very distinct recollection of looking out the Costello Courthouse windows at the ambulances, Burlington ambulances that would go by, usually to Cathedral Square, and think, wow, that's a busy service. But anyway, okay, thank you, Chief.
You're welcome. No problem.
And don't you always have the ability to override that, the dispatch, Chief?
Absolutely. Correct.
Any further questions? We've got about 4 minutes before we need to go to the public hearing. There's no further questions. And Eric, I think there was a staff recommendation on which option was your recommendation?
Sure, and this is coming from both chiefs and myself, and I'll go through this. I just want to give Chief Foley a chance to comment as well this evening if he has anything to add. But, in working with Gary and the chiefs, there appear to be 3 viable options for us moving forward. The town dispatch center, a regional dispatch center for service. We're looking at a hybrid approach of in-house for, say, police and regional for fire. And these preliminary cost estimates for regional appear to be the least cost prohibitive. And our recommendation from the board to consider is for the town to at least maintain a fiscal stake in the future and success of a regional center with a contribution in FY22 towards the facility outfit costs. Staff believes this opportunity brought on by possible implementation of regional dispatch is one that's worth continuing to pursue at this point. And the success for standing up a regional dispatch center is going to be driven by the municipal partners who are behind this. And staff will continue to evaluate and explore in-house and hybrid models in the coming year. And over that time, it's anticipated further progress to be made for regional dispatch and potentially beginning to offer services for municipalities in FY23. And then, Chief Bull, if you had anything to add, I know you haven't had a chance to speak yet.
Just that, we've been looking at the regional concept here in Chittenden County since I've been here. I know back in when I first got here, we put money on to the regional dispatch. There's been numerous discussions on regional dispatch here in Chittenden County for well over 40 years. They work when they're done correctly. It seems like we've been taking very small steps on the Chittenden County regional. We have an existing dispatch here in the Williston Police. It's been here for quite a few years. I hate to see that thrown out, taking the money that we use in that dispatch and giving it to another entity. So, our recommendation is to keep our seat within the regional, the 34,000 they've asked us to donate and to give, but we still need to model out do our own standalone dispatch for police and fire. We still don't know what the cost would be for state police to charge us. That still has to go through the legislative process. This past year, they wanted to have a say in the cost. So again, we're not sure. They're looking at possibly 2022 is maybe the startup now as the cost. So we're not even sure what that's going to happen, but I don't think we should rush into this. We have, qualified dispatchers here in the PD. I think we can make it work. But, I think we need to plan it out and come up with the actual cost to make it work. I have good IT people here within the building that know operationally, the radio system, the CAD system, the RSM system. And, coming from Windsor, where I started up a regional dispatch for 13 agencies in 2 states, fine. It was basically fire and EMS, but we had it working wonderful, and down in Massachusetts, every agency down in Mass is a PSAP, 911 PSAP, and we had a great system how we were dispatching down there. So I know my way around dispatch. I'd like to give it a run. And again, if the cost is astronomical, then we go to Plan B. But I think we should still maintain our seat within the regional, because if we don't, we lose that seat, then we got to listen to the other people on that board to dictate what we'll be able to do, and we won't have a say. So I think we need to keep the door open there, but also look at our opportunity with police, fire, EMS within the confines of Williston.
Thank you, Chief. I'm not sure if you're ready to give a yes or no at this point, but we need to consider this in the context of the fiscal year appropriation. So if you're ready now, we could do a straw vote to approve the recommendation and then discuss the budget parts later on. Or if you're not ready, we can discuss it once we get to the budget.
And Terry, this is adding 34,000 to the, and it's not in the budget right now. This would be an addition to the budget for the payment to CCPSA.
Yeah,
that's correct. Okay.
If you're in favor of this, we can go ahead and do a straw vote at this point and then discuss the budget as we get further down. So let me take a hand vote then. If you're in favor of the recommendation of staff, please raise your hand. So we have 4. So that's great. Thank you very much. And we'll tackle the 34,000 later on in the evening. So thank you all for attending, we'll close out this phase of the meeting.
Yeah, and very comprehensive report that we received from Chief Taylor.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Gary.
So hopefully Sarah has been warned that she'll be on after we do the public hearing?
Yep, she's logged in, Terry, and listening, so
Okay.
she'll.
Okay. So we are at then the public hearing on fiscal year 2022 budget. Notice is hereby given that the Williston Select Board will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, January 5th, 2021 at 8 p.m. using the virtual meeting platform Zoom to receive comments on the proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2022 and capital budget and program for fiscal years 2022 to 2027. And meeting access is listed on this. So I'll ask Eric just to give a brief overview of what the budget contains, and then we'll go on to opening the public hearing.
Sure, just grab my my budget binder here. So the proposed operating budget by staff for FY22 is $11,589,065, representing a decrease of just over $82,000 from the budget approved in fiscal year 21. The operating portion of the budget is proposed to increase by about 0.79%, and the overall budget proposed to decrease by about 0.7%. The proposed budget, as prepared and submitted in early December, would require a half-cent increase in property taxes projected using the funding model outlined. And I will add, throughout this budget process, the piece that staff's taking a close look at is the revenue portion of the budget. With COVID-19's added a number of complexities on the revenue side. We go from our grand list, looking at a flat grand list projection next year at the advice of the assessor, to kind of some unknown territory with local option tax receipts, and then other sources of revenue from town departments a bit unknown. So this budget reflects that, and that's the board will hear from the finance director after the public hearing on additional information on the fund balance projected for potential use in this budget year as well.
Good, thank you. So I ask the people who wish to speak tonight to please be brief. We've received over 20 emails that we've all read, and if we haven't, they're in our packets tonight. No harm in saying that I agree with the previous caller, and if you wish to, but this is a public hearing, so it's your turn, and I'll open it now to comments from the public.
And everyone, I see an active chat here, so I've tried to, I'll try to get everyone's name down, and I do see a couple of requests for folks that need to log off earlier, so I'll try to get those folks on earlier as well. But what's going to happen is I'm going to essentially allow you to talk, so you're unmuted and you can address the board with your comment. And I'll let you know before I unmute you, and you'll see something happen, and you'll be connected here. So bear with me. It will just take me a moment as I kind of go through this and then find your name on the list. But the first person I have is Marcy Koss, and Marcy, I'm going to connect you right now.
Welcome, Marcy.
And you'll just need to unmute, Marcy.
Okay, yeah, got it. Thank you. Hi. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. I believe the town should find the money, make it a priority to hire an energy coordinator. If we don't, our best intentions will sit on the back burner and fall through the cracks of daily life. I think most people in Williston will thank you for taking this necessary step, which I do believe weighs heavily on our minds. I got this impression 3 years ago when I went door to door with the Renewable Energy Resolution petition, and also talking with my neighbors today. In a packet of 22 letters, the one letter against hiring an energy coordinator cited the Heartland Foundation as its source. You can do an internet search and learn about this well-funded foundation's tacit mission to sow doubt on the science of climate change, funded in large part by the fossil fuel industry. This bears mentioning because if it's a difference of opinion versus an undeniable scientific fact, then there's the loophole to climb into when you want to delay taking action. And since time is of the essence, delay is denial. I wish there was a national campaign to help us break our fossil fuel habit, but unfortunately, it's up to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. And next I have Danielle Duquette and Anna. Just got to find you on the list and you'll be connected in just a moment.
Welcome, Danielle.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you, so go right ahead.
Hey, this is my daughter, Anna Thorley Doucette, going first.
Have you ever heard of the United Nations Global Goals for Sustainable Development? There are 17 goals that need to be achieved by 2030. I'm only going to be 19 years old. Adults are making the world so that the younger generations will have a struggle living. To help this, you need to hire an energy coordinator. We are learning about the global goals in class. One of them is affordable and clean energy, Goal 7. As the page on their website says, renewable energy solutions are becoming cheaper, more reliable, and more efficient every day. Our current reliance on fossil fuels is unsustainable and harmful to the planet, which is why we have to change the way we produce and consume energy. Implementing these new energy solutions as fast as possible is essential to counter climate change, one of the biggest threats to our own survival. There are many things you can do as the select board. For example, put up more town solar panels, and basically anything that we can make over and again, using the three things we always have: wind, water, and sun. You have now heard from the experts at the UN. They think the energy plan will work. Now you see why we need you to hire an energy coordinator. This concludes my letter. Sincerely, Anna Thorley Doucette, age 9, Global Goal Ambassador.
Thank you, Anna. And I just want to say thank you so much for all that you've done for adopting the plan this year. I saw the energy plan memorandum later in the agenda packet, and I'm super excited by all the steps and plans that have been undertaken. I can't wait to read it more fully. Just want to thank you for the work done so far.
Thank you very much. And we're going to be discussing that memo from Matt later on tonight.
Thank you, Danielle and Anna. So next I have Kimberly. Just a moment, Kimberly, I'll get you connected.
Welcome, Kimberly. You're muted.
Good evening, and thank you all for your service. And I too want to speak to a win-win solution where we reduce our greenhouse emissions and create good jobs and just solutions. I do want to thank you for passing the plan, which over 95 people signed the petition for that. I want to thank Eric Wells for putting together these significant ways to apply the plan so far through town staff and especially the planning department. I do want to speak to some stuff that is not addressed in the memo. My experience in a previous job was reaching out to low-income residents in Addison County, and our experience was many did not realize they qualified for help and they did not know how to apply. But once they accessed the state programs that allowed them to winterize their homes, get heat pumps, hot water heat pumps, and Star Energy appliances, there was an amazing increase in quality of life and health for these families, many of which included children. So I want to encourage you to be bold and take initiative and lead by hiring an energy coordinator who can expand the very significant things you already are working on, but coordinate those and reach out to some of our poorest citizens and to all citizens, because many of us do qualify for help in changing over to more efficient systems. I have kids living in Australia and the Bay Area of California, which are two of our worst hotspots. So as a mother, I am constantly challenged by, are they safe? And I do know they certainly endure very bad air quality when the fires in their areas basically pollute the air to a point where sometimes they cannot even leave their homes. So words are cheap. Action always costs something, but we have to clean up the part of the mess we make. We have to start local. So please help us save money, heartache, and disaster down the road by spending money now. It only gets more expensive later. And I think that's the win-win of doing something now. So please fully fund the energy coordinator position so you really reach out to those who may have the least resources in our community and everyone who may want to take action on their own. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Next, I'm going to go to Kevin Thorley and his son, Jack. Find you on the list here, Kevin. And you should be connected in just a moment.
Hi, Eric. Thank you. I'll keep my comments brief. I wanted to thank you and the select board and the other folks who worked with, including Matt on the planning committee, for the work on that memo. I think it addresses quite a few, obviously not all, but quite a few of the things that are important to us, from the energy plan. And I think it does so in a way that makes progress in a difficult financial time. On top of that, I would like to just throw my voice behind the desire to find some way to fund fully or partially, if that's the best we can do, an energy coordinator. There's a lot of money on the table in terms of various incentives, various grants. I expect there's going to be even more in the coming year. It would be good to see Williston take advantage of that, and anyone in a energy coordinator position would be well equipped to help the town, get access to that money and increase the rate at which we can make these changes. I'm going to let me turn this over to my son, Jack.
Dear Williston Selectboard, as the current state our town is going, we won't be able to achieve our 90% by 2050 renewable energy goal. The ways that we will be able to achieve that is by hiring an energy coordinator. The energy coordinator will find energy problems and find solutions. This would increase our getting to 90% by 2050 renewable energy. Sincerely, Jack Flaherty said.
Thank you.
And thank you again, Eric.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Next, we have Kaylin McCamp. Kaylin, I believe Scott's with you as well. Just a moment.
Hi there, this is Kaylin. I jumped the gun a little bit by speaking at a previous meeting, but I wanted to share my comments here in the official space as well. So echoing people's thanks for the comprehensive memo, really detailing what's going on. And just wanted to reiterate, working in the sustainability field, I know that intentions don't always follow through with unless there's really somebody specific that is responsible for them. So I would just continue to advocate that. I do think it's important to have a dedicated position for the energy coordinator and all of the tasks outlined in the energy plan, and agree with Kevin that even partial funding for getting started can make a big difference. I also think the return on investment is highest at the beginning with some of the easiest things to get started. And so there'd be a fear from the upfront cost because that will start to repay itself early in the beginning. And I'll pass it over to Scott.
Yeah, hi. Just want to thank you for the actions you've taken. Certainly, a step in the right direction. Having some experience in the environmental sector, I can relate to the complexities of legislation and ensuring that we have someone solely responsible for understanding that and being an expert in the field, I think is pretty imperative. And I'd just like to see, as a longtime Willistonian, I'd just like to see us, be on the right side of history. So I appreciate everything you've done, and I hope we can get this position funded.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, both of you.
Thank you. Going to my list next, I have Elizabeth. Just a moment, Elizabeth, we'll get you connected.
I guess is I concur. I would like to add my voice to the others. I concur with all that they have said, so that means I don't have to say as much. I think as a single town, we can't do a huge amount, but we're citizens of the town, of the state, of the world. We have to think of our children and grandchildren and future generations. And so I feel that we have to do what we can. That's what the energy plan is about. And the energy coordinator is a means that the town has to implement a lot of the plan. A lot is going on already, but this dedicated person will enable the town to move forward in a timely, efficient, and most likely cost-effective way. Could immediately, as people have said, apply for grants, kickstart the formation of the Town Energy Committee, which is also part of the plan, and also, as Kim mentioned, educate the public to what climate change is all about if they aren't aware, and what they can do about it, and the resources they can find. There's really no time to be lost. Vermont is already behind the other New England states, and the timeline is shrinking. I just got a communication from Sierra Club. Things are happening faster than scientists had anticipated. So I understand the fiscal realities. I understand having to prioritize expenditures, but I really think we need to step up and support this by including funds in the budget for the energy coordinator position. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And let's see, Brian Forrest, you're up next. Just a moment.
Hello, Brian.
Okay. Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. I've sent you several letters regarding my position, so I don't think it's any mystery about how I feel. My concern is a great concern for my children and my grandchildren. And I do all I can, I'm sure you do, to protect your children, buy them helmets and floaties and seat belts and child seats and everything we do. We have resource officers in our schools to protect our children. And yet this budget does not acknowledge, and we passed an energy plan last year, and this budget does not acknowledge any of that the threat to our children in this budget. And it's not surprising because budgets are traditionally built on the past. Department heads have histories of submitted budgets. They have projected expenditures, and it's all part of it's a timeline process. We're in an immediate process, but the climate crisis has no department to advocate for it. It has no one to protect the future generations. And so we need this board to act as the advocates for our children. We need them to not to sacrifice our children so that we can pay low taxes, which is what we're doing. Because tax rates are set by our needs, not by our we don't have a fixed set of money that we can only try and pack as much into it. Our tax rates are set by what we determine as a town are our needs. We did that when we went from a volunteer to a paid fire department, police department. This is a new safety issue, public safety issue that's come down upon us. And we need to recognize that we cannot do this on the cheap. We are not responsible for the total climate crisis, but we are responsible for all the pollution that this town puts into the air every single time that thermostat clicks in your house and your boiler, your furnace goes on and puts more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. We are responsible for what we have done. And to look at our children and say that we have done all that we can do to protect them and not have a line item in this budget to implement the town energy plan, I think the whole thing should be implemented. We have no time to waste. The IPCC in 2018 gave us 12 years from 20 to 30 to have our carbon emissions in half. If we don't do that and fully eliminate them by 2050, if we don't do that, things will be set into motion that we cannot stop, no matter how much money we put into it. This is not new. We know this can's been kicked down the road. We're at the end of the road here. We've seen half of the Australian continent, a third of the Australian continent go up in flames last year, killing over 1 billion animals. We've seen 5 towns in Oregon go up in flames. We've seen the whole West Coast totally polluted. People can't go out of their homes. Looks like Beijing. So if you have concern for your kids and grandchildren the way I do, you must understand this is a crisis. And we need to get behind it. We cannot do this on the cheap. We need to incorporate this going forward as a major component of our budget, which is in terms of our police department and fire department, in terms of millions of dollars a year. Our children's education, we fund to the term $23 million, twice our town budget, because we're so concerned about their future. But yet we have nothing in here to protect the planet which they're going to live on. So I ask you to fully fund the energy plan, get this rolling. We have no time to lose. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Next, I have Ken Grossman. Just a moment, Ken, I'll get you connected.
Okay, am I on?
You are.
Okay, great. I'm sitting here with my wife, Holly. She may say a few words as well. Full disclosure, Holly and I are kind of carpetbaggers. We bought a house on South Road in Williston about a year ago, and unfortunately, and it's our intent to become full-time citizens of Williston in the next couple of years, to be closer to our children who own homes in Bolton and in South Burlington, kind of the reverse of what you often hear. More disclosure, I had a cup of coffee in the New Hampshire State Legislature a few years back, and I serve on a town board in Barrington, New Hampshire. When I was in the legislature, I was the prime sponsor of a bill on energy efficiency. And one of its components was to set a date by which all state buildings in New Hampshire would be made properly efficient. Well, it hasn't happened yet. And I think part of the problem was, although there's all sorts of state staff who are supposed to manage it, there was no one who was assigned specifically to that task. And so 8 years later, it's just sitting there. And that's kind of a metaphor for my suggesting that you do something towards, putting something in charge of this very wonderful project that you've put together. And I'm really proud to be moving to a place where that happens. As a matter of fact, one more thing I want to add to that is that I was invited yesterday to attend a meeting of some people we'll call climate activists in New Hampshire, who want to persuade the legislature this year to get something done, which has been a problem in the past couple of years. And I told her I was going to, instead of doing that, to meet with some folks in Williston, Vermont, where I was moving, who were working on a project towards getting something done in Williston, Vermont. And she said, must be wonderful to be moving to a place where your voice might be heard and something might be accomplished. So I think you ought to do something towards getting an energy coordinator. One tiny suggestion, a little internet search told me that the town of Hartford decided to join with some surrounding towns and share the cost of an energy coordinator. And a regional approach might be an interesting thing to explore at some point. But I think you ought to get started right now. So thank you for all you've done. And that's all I have to say. Holly, do you want to add something?
Yes. I won't say much because it's been said. And I want to thank you for implementing an energy plan. And I want to encourage you to hire an energy coordinator. I think it's really important. And I think it's the next step to actually making some substantial change in Williston. Thank you for all you've done.
Thank you. In response to Ken, the Vermont legislature did set goals for fossil fuels, and there is a person in charge in the Buildings and General Services Department that is trying to make that happen in all state buildings. So thank you for your comments.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And next I have Lynn Blevins. Just a moment, Lynn.
Hi, Lynn, you're on mute.
Hi there.
Hi.
I applaud the efforts and energy that many people have put into writing the town energy plan. And I support the activities outlined in today's memo of the town energy plan implementation that Eric sent earlier today. I've already expressed the health consequences of climate change, but today, as a public health physician, I'd like to mention the health co-benefits of many of the activities that are included in the plan. In particular, switching to electric vehicles reduces air pollution, which is a significant contributor to heart and lung disease, among other health conditions. Increasing walking and biking options increases opportunities for physical activities. Both of these were featured in today's memo by Eric. These are immediate health benefits that can be realized by Willistonians as the town energy plan is implemented. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks, Lynn. And Melinda, I have you up next.
Welcome, Melinda. You're muted.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for giving me a few moments here. First, I just want to say thank you all for your service. And I also want to, I took a look at the memo that Eric put out today addressing the town energy plan implementation, and want to just let you know in general that I am very happy with all the recommendations that are in there. 2 points about why now is the time to act. First one is Williston continues to grow even through this pandemic, and the new buildings that we're putting up today, residential and commercial, will be here for hopefully 100 years or more. And the changes that we make and the decisions we make as far as their efficiency and how they run and the equipment that are in them will have far-ranging impacts into the future. But the important thing is to have it happen as soon as possible in order to have the biggest impact and at least the most cost-effective solution and the longest ranging impact. So that's one of the reasons why we need to act now. And then the other reason is that everybody in our town uses energy, and every dollar that we spend on fossil fuels, and the majority of every dollar we spend on electricity, exits Vermont. So if we can find a way to save energy, that's great. If we can find a way to generate energy locally, that means that we keep that money that is currently exiting the state, we keep it here. And that right now, that sounds like a really good idea to keep money here. So I'm really encourage you to move forward with anything that you can on the energy plan. And I really would like to encourage you to move forward on funding the town energy positions. So As you work through the difficult decision of balancing the importance of our town's financial burdens, I respectfully ask that you assign an appropriate weight to our responsibility to address our energy usage and its resultant climate impact. Now is a good time to fund our town energy coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Melinda. So I just put in the chat, but I don't have anyone else on my list. Does anyone else like to comment? Have a last call here. Terry, I don't see anyone else wishing to speak.
Thank you. No, thanks to everybody for your comments and being brief and to the point. So thank you. At this point, I thought I'd be looking for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're officially closed, and we'll move then back to the town meeting 2021 logistics with Town Clerk Sarah Mason.
Hi, Sarah. I'll get you connected. Just a moment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
So we have your memo, and
Okay.
you probably heard that we do have now a petition for the ballot regarding cannabis.
I heard that earlier when I was leaving work, and Eric was just getting that email from the gentleman. So I did hear that earlier today.
Good. And we had him on earlier under public comment to explain what he was looking for. And that's the thing. First thing on your memo, it talks about the submission of petitions.
Right. The deadline for that is probably the first major deadline we have. That's the 14th. So I don't know what, 10 days from now. So that one is, if you know, certainly our first deadline is sort of coming up. Were there more questions about that?
We'll be meeting next Tuesday, and the question that we'll need to determine either tonight or then is whether or not we require the petitions to be signed.
Okay. 5% of the registered voters is 422, so that he knows what they're shooting for as far as a target number.
Yes.
Okay. Shall I move on to town meeting logistics? So I don't have anything much to report, unfortunately, from 3 weeks ago when we sort of got this ball rolling. Most of that is because there is no decision yet out of Montpelier or the governor or legislature, anybody that has said one way or the other whether some of the directives in place during November, August, 2020 in general will be in play for 2021. So until someone makes that decision, we're sort of waiting in a holding pattern. Terry, today I did watch a little bit of the joint fiscal committee. I can't remember if I'm saying that correctly.
Well,
and they certainly quickly realized they were in over their head and it was not a decision that they would be making. So Jim Condos was on that call with Chris Winters, and I'm sure that they are working to try to come up with an answer. The LCT had in their newsletter, though, that it will most likely be the third week of January before there is an actual maybe cut and dry decision of whether anyone is allowed to mail ballots to all voters. That's kind of the big sticking point right now. If we stick with what we know as sort of normal, you request a ballot early if you'd like one, or you can go to the polls, or the mass mailing to everybody. So I sort of have two routes planned out right now. Like I said, kind of in a holding pattern of just waiting for someone to make a decision. And I think all towns are in the same boat. I've talked to my other clerks a little bit, and no one really has said, no one select board has said from the towns that I've heard of so far in our other 5 towns here, yes, we're definitely wanting to go this route, or we're definitely going to go this route. So, like I said, the pros and cons to both sides still, certainly, waiting for a little direction, and then things will move quickly. So that's sort of my update. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to field any of those. And hopefully you're just sort of thinking about where your decision might go. So when we do have a direction, we can sort of make it and then pivot in one of those 2 directions.
So the meeting of joint fiscal you were talking about, the Secretary of State had requested $1.5 million to assist municipalities in mailing ballots. So that's on hold at this point.
It sounds what? I'm sorry?
That's on hold at this point.
Yeah, I missed the beginning of the meeting, unfortunately. It was almost 9:45 before I remembered that I was able to watch via that link, which was really, really great. I mean, the accessibility of having those online like that was really, I've never watched anything before. I've never gone to Montpelier. So people, I know it's hard and Zoom is difficult, but boy, was it really interesting to be able to watch and listen, live to what they were all debating. So it was really interesting, but it unfortunately didn't go very far. I think that they had said this really has to go to some other committee or some other higher ups. So there was no, and we didn't think we were going to get an answer today either. It's only January 5th, and it wasn't going to be a definitive answer today.
Appropriations Committee will have to approve that, and probably Ways and Means as well. But so it'll take a little bit of time, but the longer it takes, the less opportunity that we'll have to do that. So
right. The good news is that the urgency is out there. Every memo that I have seen, everyone has said this is urgent. This is the timeline. Which is sort of in that memo, so some of the dates. So it certainly is at the top of everyone's list because we're looking at what, 6, maybe 7 weeks, not even at this point. So, it will happen.
Yes.
One way or the other.
Right.
I do have a quote for if we have to use a mailing house and have someone help get that process moved along. So like I said, I have some of these players in the wings just waiting to pull it together one direction or the other.
Good. And the time for our submissions to you for select board report and town managers report and other things is coming up soon?
So yeah, next week would be great. Technically the end of the month is when that has to be over to repro, but certainly, next week, I don't have my calendar in front of me, maybe the 15th or something of next Friday, but Terry, we can shoot offline. I can just remind you whether you write the select board one. And I don't know who writes the legislative one. It's usually you, Jim, Ginny, and Debbie, but I don't know who actually writes that.
The one for the House, I usually write, and I started on that yesterday and got some feedback from Jim and looking for some input from Aaron as well. So
okay,
I'm going to have that to you either by Friday or Monday, I think.
Okay, great. Plenty of time. Appreciate it.
Good. Any other further questions for Sarah? The timelines are pretty well set.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you too.
Bye-bye.
So we'll move on to the budget review for fiscal year 2022. We do have some updates from Shirley regarding the fund balance. And Eric, why don't you lead off the discussion?
Sure. Eric, do you want to do the energy update while I've got Matt here as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we can leave with that. Then Shirley, I'll get you connected after. But I'm going to connect you right now, Matt. Just a moment. And Terry, Matt and I, when we discussed earlier, we just kind of walked through this this memo briefly for the board on energy planning update as the board thinks about that component here.
Yes.
I just want to repeat and thanks to everyone who commented both tonight and wrote in earlier to be engaged in the budget process. It's it's not always the town receives so many comments regarding the budget. So it's much appreciated to read those comments and to hear those comments from myself, and I'm sure the board as well. So I just want to share with the public and the board that implementing elements of the energy plan are underway at a staff level. And I agree it's important work, and I believe a variety of strategies can be utilized in the implementation of different elements of the plan. And just to remind everyone, the plan's a guidance document with possible implementation measures for the goals it contains that can be revised over time as a chapter in the town plan. So to date, I've tasked our planning director, Matt Belanger, with examining the implementation steps for the planning related components of the plan. And he'll provide a brief overview tonight and address some of these tasks underway. And in the review and considering next steps, Matt and I discuss a detailed draft charge for a future energy committee is one component that staff's going to be taking a look at. And this work's going to involve an analysis of the pathways of the energy plan for feasibility of next steps at the current time. And in looking at this plan, my belief is coordination with community partner organizations, outside agencies, and leveraging existing staff resources for either project, grant writing work, and other elements will be critical elements for success in implementing these many components. I plan to look at these models for partnerships in the coming year and explore these as well. Some were mentioned in comments this evening. And I also want to take this opportunity to update the community on our net metering credits. You may recall the town purchased the 20 solar trackers behind Town Hall in the fall of 2018, exercised the purchase option, and I obtained some information from the planning office and did some math last week, and to date the town's received nearly $160,000 in net metering credits, and that's applied to reduce its electricity costs from these solar trackers. And in addition, we have solar panels on the roof of the Public Works facility. We've received about $5,000 in net metering credits with that arrangement. And the town has an option to purchase those solar panels coming up in the next year or so, which we'll be looking at closer. So that work's underway, and I just want to turn over to Matt to kind of briefly touch on some of the planning component elements that he's been working on.
Good, thank you. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me. So if you do have the memo Eric put together on this, the planning part really starts on page 3 after the discussion of the energy credits. And I think I want to start with a really broad picture, which is to say that there are a lot of things about Williston's overall land use planning scheme that, among other things, are energy efficient. So the general idea of concentrating the bulk of new growth and development in a growth center, which is easier to serve with transit and easier to move around in without an individual vehicle by walking, biking, or again, using transit, and where you have a lot of multi-tenant residential or multi-tenant commercial or even mixed-use buildings encouraged and supplied with the services they need to exist, means that you have uses of land that can happen in a way that are quote unquote naturally more energy efficient. Fewer exterior walls per dwelling unit at the building scale, and lower transportation energy expenditure because things can be traveled to in a way other than driving a car. And I was in the growth center this morning buying gas at Simon's Plaza gas station adjacent to Finney Crossing. And just in the time I was there, filling my gas car with a tank of gas, but I was watching people come walking out of the residential portion of Finney Crossing and head toward the commercial portions of Finney Crossing and Maple Tree Place across the street. In a corridor that is served by transit, and the town's continued efforts to build, support, and to some degree contain that kind of growth in a limited geographic area do play into the broad brush goals of the energy plan and the overall comprehensive plan. That said, what I really tried to do in the memo is respond to those elements of the pathways in the recently adopted energy plan where I do think there's some measurable progress that's been made or something that's underway, and give you my best prediction of when I think some of that work product might make its way to the select board. I don't want to read these all in great detail because I feel like that would take a lot of time, but I'd like to just go through them briefly, and then please stop me as you are looking for additional detail or clarification. So, 2.3 through 2.5 on this first page of the memo that talks about planning are a lot about the energy that is expended and the carbon that's created through people needing to move themselves or move goods around via transportation. So, continue to work with local motion. We certainly do that in a number of ways. I think every time we take on a planning effort that involves bicycle or pedestrian infrastructure or programming or education, local motion is our go-to. They're a regional partner with the CCRPC, the Regional Planning Commission as well. And we've recently had a couple of small grant opportunities that we're pursuing. One is called a Better Places grant that would need to be operationalized in the village center. That immediately the thought is, can we demonstrate some of these sustainable transportation strategies for people and make them more visible? And one of our first go-tos on that is how does that integrate with what all that local motion does. The idea of creating local park and ride spaces, this is embedded in the mobility projects group and official map projects, which are underway, in which we expect to be getting a draft of that official map document to the select board toward the end of this fiscal year. So this is both about path and trail infrastructure that would connect places, but also trying to find those nodes where there's opportunities to do sort of distributed small park and ride facilities. This can be as simple as taking an existing town parking lot and saying, here's a sign that says it's okay to leave your car here for a few hours and carpool into town with somebody if we think that's supportable there. Or taking an existing parking area and adding some wayfinding and saying, here's a more secure bike rack or bike locker so that you could ride here to, meet a ride share vehicle and leave your bicycle in a place that's secure and you don't need to take all the accessories off of it before you leave because you're just going to be able to place it in a locker. We sometimes call these mode shift facilities or mini or micro park and ride. And the idea is, we haven't had a lot of luck getting VTrans to build us one big giant park and ride off of exit 12, although we're eternally hopeful. Maybe we should build 12 little park and rides and try to find out where in town those should go and how we should connect them. In terms of continuing to work with Green Mountain Transit, the town pays to be a member of GMT and maintains representation there. And of course, we coordinate with them, and we are watching with eager anticipation as they pilot a demand ride program for the next 2 years in Montpelier. So this is a public service, but it's not a bus that comes on a schedule. It's a ride that you arrange either through call center or smartphone app. And, we'll see how that goes in Montpelier. I think the other piece of that is whether it's through GMT or our neighboring towns, that we'd be looking for, what the viability of that might be as a regional service that could go out beyond the areas that make sense to serve with scheduled transit. I'm into page 4 of the memo at this point, and we have some pathways here that are talking about the placement of electric vehicle charge stations and making sure that the town's bylaws are supportive of those. I'm happy to say that I believe the town's bylaws are supportive of electric vehicle charging stations, allowing them to be integrated in as an accessory to any place where the parking of vehicles is allowed. In other words, we don't treat them like a gas station and only allow them where gas stations are allowed. We don't have things in our sign ordinance that would make it difficult for the type of directory or awareness signage that usually comes with things like that. We don't make it especially difficult for that to happen. We have a planned Tesla super, it's not a supercharger, but a regular Tesla station for the Healthy Living site. And we've spoken to some other folks, and there are also approved and integrated EV charge heads at the Hannaford supermarket that went through our permitting process and were able to be handled smoothly. The other part is about anticipating future and or maybe requiring EV charge facilities in new development. And I would say that that's something we don't do in the bylaw right now. We probably could. We do incentivize it, and we're seeing that in the incentives that this body adopted in the town's residential growth management system about a year and a half ago. We are seeing some responsiveness to those incentives in the kinds of developments that people are talking about. And I'll have more that I can tell you about that in a couple of months once we go through the March growth management round. But I know from our preliminary conversations with our applicants who want to be competitive, they're saying, what would that incentivized sustainable transportation facility look like? How many bike racks do I need? How many charge heads do I need? How many carpool parking spaces do I need to have be part of my subdivision in order to be competitive in Williston? We do get into some items in 2.10 related to the town's consideration of electric vehicles. And I think you saw some feedback from the Planning Commission integrated into its capital budget review process this year. The Planning Commission trying to sort of raise the issue that in future capital budgets, they would like to see pressure from the town and the select board to the departments that deal with vehicle replacement to put some more analysis into the vehicle replacements that are going on. Even if for the next couple of years, what we're saying is, well, we looked at the electric police cruiser and it costs X, and the gas one has a lifespan cost of half that, or we looked at it, but we found that for these reasons it wouldn't work. I think as the technology matures, some of those reasons that you might go with the conventional vehicle will begin to fall away, and it's important to start tracking that. So the Planning Commission's active in implementing the energy plan by giving that feedback into the town as part of its capital budget review. Again, a couple in 2.12 and 2.13 goals related to the establishment and then the maintenance of paths. So again, on the establishment side and planning side, that's what the official map project is all about. And I will just say that that's not the first time the town's ever thought about this stuff. There have long been plans reflecting the town's desires for primitive paths, multi-use paths, and on-road facilities. This is just a further refinement and bringing some more regulatory authority to that. And again, much like talking about EVs, when the Planning Commission looked at the capital budget this year, it looked at some suggestions they wanted to make about elevating the prioritization of the town's capacity to plow snow on its pedestrian and bicycle facilities, to be able to treat those more in the same way that roads are treated. The next part is energy auditing in 3.1. And, I just note that the town does do some energy auditing, has done it in the past, does continue to update it. I think can do more, and probably, down to the level of detail that the plan is talking about, which is, use BTUs, consider Energy Star ratings, look at it across the year. I don't know that it's ever been done quite in that format. That's something that I think we can work on. The next item, 5.1, says adopt the stretch code. So into the zoning. Today, we incentivize the stretch code or what we call the high performance standard in that growth management system. What we are hearing back from the development community is they're not accessing that incentive because the insulation requirement in walls is R40. And that results in the need to build a thicker wall than most of the conventional door and window materials that are available come in, adding significant expense. So, I can write you the draft. I can write the draft for the Planning Commission that would adopt that as a standard. But I think the detail and the conversation for the policymakers is how does that balance against goals like housing creation or just property rights. What we're hearing as we're holding it out for an incentive is that it's not one people are going for because it's considered cost prohibitive at this time. Again, talking a little bit about making sure we're not burdening EV charge stations. I don't believe we are, but we are also adding some more flexibility in our parking standards, and that's a bylaw draft transmission that should be coming to you just to make sure there's something to do once you make it through budget and town meeting season. So that's on its way. The next one talks about adding incentives for overhead parking lot solar. Certainly going to be an element of the form-based code conversation that will be kicking off with big public input in March and April. This is something in a form that's incentivized in the performance standards in the growth center already under what we call the PIC 5 of 9 criteria. Rooftop or otherwise solar production of a significant amount of energy demand on a site is one way that a new development can meet the PIC 5 criteria when they're building a new site in the growth center. But we've talked a little bit about ways that when you have an area that you're trying to have develop like a downtown, you generally want things to have a presence on the street, things like buildings and parks and structures. And you don't tend to want parking lots to have a presence on the street. But when you have a grid of streets, which you also want, you end up with lots that have lots of street frontage. And sometimes it's not feasible to put solid building on all 3 or 4 street frontages. So could the addition of a parking canopy, perhaps along with a landscape seating wall as a design element, count towards some of that required street frontage and bring life to the street without necessarily asking somebody to build a more extensive building than they want or need. So that's one of the ways we're looking at expanding that incentive. The next one, 5.5, talks about revising the Unified Development Bylaw to require energy generation on site, a significant portion. And again, this is something we're incentivizing in growth management through the energy incentives. It's also something that you pretty much have to do if you would ever imagine a project so great that you didn't have to go through growth management, what we call the high flyer standard that's there. And all I will say about it is, as an incentive, it's similar to the R40 wall. It's a high bar. And what we're hearing from our development community is, I've got solar on top of a lot of the buildings at Finney Crossing, and that's offsetting the energy consumption for the lighting of the common areas of the building, but that's about it. So you may need to dedicate more space to that generation elsewhere in order to really meet something like that. If you're trying to balance, the site development against the energy production. So I think there's some more analysis that needs to go into the feasibility of making it an outright requirement. But we are likely to see some refinements to that as we move forward with our bylaw amendments. Reevaluating allowable residential density in the mixed use and village districts. Mixed use means the districts in the growth center. So that's definitely part of the conversation with form-based code. So again, the idea of a form-based code, you're emphasizing the regulation of what the buildings look like and how they're placed on their sites. And you're de-emphasizing what happens inside of the buildings to some degree. And, the traditional way of thinking of that is that you're not so worried about what use is happening in the building, but you also might not be as worried about exactly how many dwelling units are inside of that building. Density can be part of that conversation. And in terms of thinking about it in the village, Again, we have sort of our own in-house version of form-based code that we've been working through with the Planning Commission and Historic and Architectural Advisory Committee that would, again, result in a code amendment that would emphasize the form of buildings and sites that are added into the village without worrying as much about the number of dwelling units per acre, encouraging multifamily patterns and flexibility. And if any of you took the density quiz about the village back when we had that published on the website, you have a variety of residential densities in the village, anywhere from one unit per more than an acre to 11 units per acre. That's a pretty big spread, and yet you can walk down the street and it all kind of works. That's because the form makes sense, and so that is a piece of another pending bylaw amendment that you'll be seeing sooner rather than later. And lastly, Pathway 5.13 of 513, which talks about creating a transferable development rights bank to transfer residential unit development from the rural and residential districts into the growth center. So today we allow for the transfer of development rights. It happens very, very, very rarely because you have to have a willing seller of development rights in a place that you want to conserve and a willing buyer of those rights who are aligned in space and time. And it just doesn't usually work out that way. So one of the regulatory tools that can be added to that would be to say, well, if the town conserves a piece of land, or if somebody helps the town conserve a piece of land, and we're taking a certain number of dwelling units off the table by doing that, do we make those units available to somebody in the growth center for a price, with those funds going back into something like the Environmental Reserve Fund to be used to conserve more land? The mechanics of it are not the hard part. You figure out how many units per acre come out of the sending zone and what they're worth in the receiving zone. That part's just numbers. The hard part is making sure that supply and demand are aligned in a way that somebody's actually motivated to use the program. And this is a challenge that's come up in South Burlington. It's come up in other communities. In service of that, one of the things that we were very interested in having be part of our form-based code consultant team was a team that was ready to do a market study and actually try to give us some more refined feedback about what the demand for future growth and development in the growth center is and is likely to be. So as we understand more about that, we can start to make sure not just that we can write the numbers down of how a banked TDR would work, but also that we might get the incentives at the right level that somebody would be interested in using them. So that's the memo at a really high level. You'll note that I'm skipping numbers in the memo. There are things that I don't think we've made progress on beyond where we were when the plan was adopted, or that I don't think are coming as soon. And most of what I'm talking about here are the items in the plan that have to do with adjusting the town's requirements for land use and what it asks of development when it comes in. Those are regulatory changes that come with a cost, but not a monetary cost to the town, just the cost of the time of establishing them and the opportunity cost of what they might do in terms of how they affect what kind of development is able to move forward in town. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to clarify or answer any other questions you have.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt? Quick ones for tonight?
Oh, that seemed pretty comprehensive. Thank you.
Anything other for any members of the board? Thank you very much, Matt. We appreciate your taking the time to do this for us.
Terrific. Thank you.
And keeping on top of this.
Before I go, Eric, are you looking for me to stick around potentially for the executive session?
No, okay. I can handle that, Matt.
Terrific. Thank you.
All right.
Have a great night. Happy New Year, everybody.
You too. Thanks.
Good night, Matt.
So let's continue our discussion then about the budget review. And we have several things to talk about tonight, and hopefully give directions to staff about additions or subtractions and funding level. But I think is Shirley, Eric, is Shirley going to be on right now for the fund balance report?
I'm getting her connected, Terry, and I'll mention for the board, including your packet, is the possible budget changes sheet that's been updated. And I did find out earlier in the week that the Green Mountain Transit assessment was going to be about $8,000 less than what we projected. That's a nice variance to incorporate. You know, as we look at this tonight, if the board has any questions on these possible budget changes, and you provide feedback on one that I didn't fill out on the sheet regarding regional dispatch earlier in the meeting. These kind of, you'll see where we end up. It's a net about $30,000 addition with the regional dispatch based on these possible changes.
Good. Hi, Shirley.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
So did you want me to walk through the possible budget changes, or are they pretty self-explanatory? Well, I guess maybe I'll cover one of them. The other, you know, the wages, the Allen Book Trail, those were just changes we found as we, you know, were fine tuning the numbers and as the deputy chief position was filled. But the sidewalk bond principal and interest, that came about as going through the audit process. We're just essentially grossing that expense back up. And then you'll see we have a transfer in from the rec impact fees for $45,000. So those things, it's just grossing up the expense and grossing up the revenue to properly disclose things in the financial statements and therefore in our budget. So other than that, and if there's no questions on those few changes, I was going to move on to the fund balance update.
Anybody with questions for that?
No.
No, okay.
I'm going to put your memo on the screen, Shirley, since it has some numbers on it that came out late today.
Yes. So as I am working on the putting the audited financial statements together, sort of piece by piece, and working with our new auditors, there were lots of things that have come about through that process. And in the end, there'll be some work, but it'll make the accounting function more efficient, and it'll get rid of some of the many funds that we have that we don't really need. So I'm going to talk about the host town fund, and the cemetery really is the same thing. So looking at the agreements, the host town fund agreements, those revenues are really unrestricted revenues and should be reflected as part of the town's general fund. Same with the cemetery operations part. That's really the cemetery operations are really funded by taxes, by fees, whichever funding source you want to choose, but they're really part of the general fund budget. They really shouldn't be off in another budget by themselves. And then, you know, through the budget process, we say, okay, we're going to, you know, allocate this much of those host town fees to the equipment savings account, as we do now. But so that's why the very first number in this analysis says, here's what I think, based on working on the financial statements, our fund balance, the general fund balance is going to be is $3,667,000. And again, I'm going to emphasize that, you know, my second time working through this process, and lots of changes are happening this year to change the financial statements and reflect a more accurate picture, let's say that. So I am reflecting here the fund balance that exists currently in the host town fund, bringing it back into the general fund, because that's where we're going with the financial statement. So that's what the $332,000 represents. So the estimated fund balance, general fund balance at June 30th includes both of those things. So let's just say right under $4 million. So now we're going to go through the process of rolling forward the fund balance to get to June 30th, FY22. So in FY21, in the budget, we've already said that we're going to use 500,000 of the fund balance to reduce the property tax. And we're going to use 81,000 to for capital expenses. So through the revenue projections or the expense projections that we have done earlier, we are fully anticipating to use those amounts in their entirety in the FY21 budget just because of revenue shortfalls other places. This example assumes that so I'll just say our other operating revenues and costs are net zero, based on, again, our projection. So then to create an accurate fund balance, I've got to roll in the host town revenue and then the host town transfer to the equipment fund for FY21. Generating an estimated fund balance at June 30th, 21 of 3.2 million. Can you scroll that down a little farther, Eric? I don't know if I can. Okay. So then we're going to roll it forward one more year because what we're getting at is what do we think the fund balance is going to be? And there are some options about using more of that fund balance on the FY22 budget, and that's the bottom of this memo. But first, we're just going to roll it forward and say, okay, where are we? And then where are we in regards to our fund balance policy? So our current projected budget says we're going to use 560,000 to reduce the property tax increase, and we're going to use 66,000 to fund capital expenses. We anticipate 330,000 in host town revenue. And when I say host town revenue, I'm just assuming you know what I'm talking about, but that's our agreements with Casella for the transfer station, and that's with the waste district for the MRF and for composting. We get fees from them based on tonnage. And then the last thing I threw in there makes it really confusing, but I'm just trying to get to the unassigned fund balance. And that FY22 year-end non-spendable fund balance, that's just that part of the fund balance goes to assets that are not spendable. So what do I think the estimated unassigned fund balance is at June 30th of 22 is 2.4 million and change. So the next, right under that, I'm just talking about, here's our fund balance policy. It says the fund balance, the unassigned fund balance. And when I say unassigned, that's what it is. It's not for any specific purpose. So, the select board could designate that for something specific, through your own motion or, through the budget process. But essentially that is our rainy day fund. So our reserve for the unexpected, like COVID, for example. So what our fund balance policy says that we want to maintain a fund balance, an unassigned fund balance between 10% of the operating budget, and I said not less than 10% and not more than 20%. So if you scroll down a little bit more, Eric, please. So our FY22 operating budget right now, and that's the number without any of these budget changes we talked about, the 11,598,000. 10% of that is 1,160,000, and 20% is 2,320,000 rounded. So you can see my estimated fund balance roll forward is just slightly over the 20%. And we have been over the 20% for a few years now, but not a bad place to be in light of what's happened last year and what's happening this year. So then I just wanted to give you a little tax rate history just to show you where we've been and what those increases look like. So right now, the projected FY22 tax rate is 0.28%. And our goal is always to minimize that rate increase to the taxpayers. So that represents, 0.051 cents of increase, which is basically about $100,000 over the FY21 budget. So then, with all that information in mind, some options for you to consider are that you could leave the fund balance right now is 560,000, or I should say the fund balance to go towards property tax reduction is 560,000. The last couple of years, so FY 20 and 21, that number has been 500,000. And I didn't go back many years, but I'll just say in the few years that I have gone back because I'm looking at something else, that fund balance allocation to property taxes really hasn't been used because we're generating a net positive bottom line. So, and this is very preliminary because the auditors haven't looked at the schedule yet, but when I calculated that number for FY 20, it's about 250,000, but I'm sure that number is going to change a little bit, but that's in the ballpark. So even with COVID this year, we saw a lot of belt tightening by the departments. And when we get to actually looking through the financial statements, there is this Schedule F that I will share with you because it's really quite impressive when you look at the budget versus the actuals, and almost every department has a favorable variance to budget, meaning people did what we asked them to do and dug in and found savings. So we didn't, to save dollars, essentially, with a revenue reduction because of COVID. So we are increasing what in the FY22 budget, what we're going to rely on for fund balance for property taxes by 60,000. So the first option is, just leave what we have in the current FY22 budget projection. The next bullet is about funding regional dispatch in the ways that, and I think the vote was yes to fund the 34,000. So the options to fund that are from fund balance, for property taxes, which would mean, increasing property taxes a hair for that. Or, we can muddle through and reassess the budgeted expenses to see if we can find some reductions there, or a combination of all of these things. So I'm not sure what we'd find in the budgeted expenses because we did a pretty thorough job when Eric and I were sitting with all the department heads trying to slim expenses wherever we could, trying to keep the total expense budget under last year. So my last bullet is, and again, these aren't recommendations, they aren't suggestions, they're just information for you to consider that you could increase the 560, what we're saying we're going to use out of fund balance to help minimize the increase in property taxes. But I guess my warning there is that unassigned fund balance is our protection, is our reserve for the unexpected. And, and I keep coming back to COVID because none of us expected it. And here we were. And even though we didn't end up dipping into our fund balance, we didn't dip into our fund balance in FY20 because of the department's efforts to save funds, to not spend at all if possible. So I think that really was what spared us for the FY20. But it's also, looking at that with a conservative eye and ensuring the financial health of the town when you're looking at, whether you decide to increase that 560 to a bigger number, to reduce that property tax rate increase. But the other thing I'm just going to mention is that when we think about using the fund balance to help reduce property tax increases, we also don't want to decrease it too much. So instead of having a nice mellow increase in property taxes, we kind of are going along and then all of a sudden, oops, we don't have any fund balance. So oops, it's going to take a big jump up. So trying to keep that sort of on a very flat or mild incline And that's really all I had to offer you in regards to fund balance, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Shirley. Are there questions for Shirley regarding her memo?
Shirley, hey, Jeff here. The question I have is, I'm looking at your memo, and I'm looking at the estimated general fund balance at June 30th, 2020, June 30th, 2021, and then estimated June 30th, 2022. And I'm seeing a decline, significant decline in both those 1 year periods. I'm not sure how I should interpret that. We're still slightly above 20%, but on the other hand, seeing a significant decline like that doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy.
Me neither, Jeff. But part of the whole reason for that is that in this roll forward, I am saying that we aren't expecting to see an increase from our normal operations. We're expecting basically, I'll just say operating revenues, so fees, property taxes, to offset all of our expenses, our wages, our insurance, et cetera, because I don't have a projection other than that. So being very conservative, I'm saying those things are going to break even. But what we are doing is in FY21, we're taking 781,000 of our fund balance to pay for capital expenses and property tax reduction. In FY22, we're taking 626,000 for the same purpose. So we are eating into that fund balance by using those dollars to help reduce the property tax increase.
And Jeff, another point, I think Shirley touched on it earlier, but the town has budgeted to use that $500,000 to reduce property taxes the last number of years. And as a result of the town's revenue projections coming in higher than budgeted, in reality, that was never needed to be dipped into. So as we look at our current horizon and try to figure out what may happen, we're being conservative and thinking about we're actually going to need those funds. But, the world can change, hopefully, for the better here in the next year and a half, and we could be back in that position. But to kind of paint the conservative financial picture for the board, that's why we're building that in the projection here.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah.
No.
It's an eye opener, isn't it, Jeff?
Yes, it is. I guess the way to put it is that I don't know what the right words is, but that nice free ride we were getting because of our local option tax performance, if you will, is over. Now comes the whole cold, hard reality of, we got to live within this budget.
Right. Well, and the other factor, and like Eric said, we hope that things will turn around and we'll get back to the point of, even though we may say we're going to use fund balance to help reduce taxes, that we're going to get back to where we were and we don't really need those funds. But for FY20, it'll be too late by the time I get to do the projection, but at the end of January, I will do another projection as I did in October through December and see where we are. But, with our current projection, we are absolutely expecting to use all of those dollars. The only thing we might, if all the capital expenses don't get spent within the year, maybe that will be a smaller number. But for this purpose, being very conservative, I'm going to say that we'll spend those dollars.
Yeah. Okay.
Any further questions for Shirley at this point?
No.
No. Okay. So if there's at least three of us on the board that remembers 2008, the Great Recession, and we had to essentially not fund a whole bunch of stuff and underfunded a whole bunch of stuff in that year, including reducing the number of streetlights that we had in town. And there was actually a a motion to not do the fireworks on the 4th of July, but and we actually did the fireworks, but so we're in that kind of a situation again now. And then in the current year, fiscal year, we've looked at the projections and decreased spending for the current fiscal year. And now we're looking at the next fiscal year and looking at what the recommendations are from the department heads and town manager and finance director. And at this point, we're really unsure of the income that we're going to be getting in the next fiscal year. And so we're reducing spending in some of our areas, or at least recommending decreasing spending. My own personal thought is that I would like not to see a tax increase of even 0.5 cent, but level funded. One thing I learned in the legislature is not using one-time money for ongoing expenses. So I would not support at this point hiring a new staff person for the an environmental position or the conservation position. And I don't have any other recommendations for staff to take a look at. I think we have agreed to put 34,000 in for the dispatch services. And I think and the rest of the things that Shirley and Eric have recommended as far as changes in the budget.
Terry, the position you were just talking about, is that the energy coordinator position?
Sorry, the energy coordinator, yes.
Yeah, okay. One option I want to put out there is, and we've used this in the past, is funding the energy coordinator on, and I'm going to use the word a part-time basis. That could mean one of two things. One is we don't fund it for a full year. We fund it for half a year. We've used that in the past. Where I guess the position couldn't be hired until the second half of fiscal year 2022. That would at least get somebody into that position in 2022, not in the beginning. Well, it probably wouldn't happen in the beginning no matter what, but later in 2022 versus earlier in 2022. The other option is to think of it as maybe a part-time position, which may come with its own liabilities, i.e. difficult to find somebody who could be qualified, but willing to do that on a part-time basis. So I'd like to throw those out there as options to have the coordinator position become part of the town, but at a cost that has some, but not as much impact if they were funding it full-time.
So if Shirley, can you tell us if we were to hire a full-time position there, what's the estimated cost of salary and benefits?
I, of course, don't have a clue what a full-time energy coordinator would, but let me just give me a second here. I'm going to pull up and I'm going to give you my best guess of what I think that professional position would look like.
Just take Matt's position and double it.
I'll apply for it.
On the benefits side of a full-time position, our allocation per FTE is about $18,000 as we spread that cost across the organization. So that would be a factor.
Yeah. So my rough guess with those two things combined is 100,000.
So if we funded it, let's say at halftime, we would cut that by 50%.
Yep.
So that is my recommendation.
Is there any support for that recommendation for staff to look at it?
Unfortunately, Jeff, I don't support it. This is probably one of the worst. Well, I think 2008 was the budget situation was truly desperate, and the difficulty that we're having now is we don't know if it's going to be truly desperate or not yet. That being said, I don't. There is no question but that climate change is a horrible thing, and that we need to do everything, including having a full-time position on this. The concern that I have is that I don't think that we've seen the full results of the pandemic yet. Economically, is what I'm talking about here. We haven't, and unfortunately, that economics is driven by the numbers. I think there is going to be over 500,000 Americans dead by March, and that number is going to go up before we can get everything done. That is going to affect the economy, and we're already looking at a hole in our budget, a budget that is supported by a sales tax that is not terribly great, and at the same time we have a grand list that isn't growing as much as it did, and people are going to have trouble paying their taxes already. And let me just say that I've been thinking about this a lot, so let me just get this out, is that at the same time we have to balance the low income children who are going to want to go to the day camps, and are we going to charge them full freight when they're already in economic difficulty? The time to make that decision is pretty much now with the budget. I don't think we should, or I think we should have some wiggle room in it. There's just so much bad stuff going on and so much uncertainty. I'm still not exactly sure what's going to happen with the ratio that the state formula uses for state aid to education relative to how much the assessments are in town. And if that isn't fixed, then we've got a problem. It's not a municipal governance problem, but it's still going to be a problem that our taxpayers are going to face. So I mean, there's just so much going on that I desperately want to. I think I fully acknowledge we are boiling the planet, and we are responsible for that as much as everybody else. I really want to do this, but I'm also afraid that if we we just can't afford it this year. I really want this to be done next year. I want it to be a full-time position. But this is a casualty of the pandemic, and I wouldn't be in support of it.
Okay. Gordon?
Tough when I'm caught in the middle. I certainly see Jeff's point of view. I see yours as well, Ted. I'm a science teacher. I definitely see the effects of the climate change. We can't deny what's happening. But I also see the ramifications of all the other points that Ted just made within the pandemic. And I certainly, my heart doesn't want to say pause on this position right now, because I do fully support it. I just don't know if this is the right time and place to ask more of this when we're sacrificing other things that we've already, I don't want to say cut, but already diminished or have leveled. So I'm gonna side on the side of holding on it as well.
This is any other year, I'd be supportive of this as well, but I just can't do it this year. So I'd be looking, is there support for keeping the tax rate level?
I support that.
I guess I need to ask, what does that mean?
The current tax rate is what, 27.49, and to keep it level.
I mean, I certainly support that, but I like the idea of that. Before I can support it, I want to make sure I understand what is the liability of that.
And I think that's what we would be asking staff to come back with recommendations.
I see how you're, okay, I get how you're asking the question. Okay.
Jeff, Shirley and I can speak to that tonight. You know, we're looking at that projected half-cent increase to raise $100,000. So if we remove the tax levy increase, we would need to essentially use $100,000 of fund balance to offset that, plus another $30,000 of fund balance for the net cost for the regional dispatch expense. Right. So it essentially $130,000 approximately additional fund balance utilization than what was in the original draft in December.
Okay.
I guess we're going back to the departments and saying, okay, what can we strip down? What can
and basically that would be $130,000 out of the operating budget, probably not out of the capital budget.
Right.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. I certainly support trying to achieve that goal. And when I see what you come back with, I may or may not agree with everything, but
we all may.
Yeah.
Anything else that we need to talk about as far as budget tonight? I would anticipate next week that we will try to finalize the budget.
Yeah, just so staff is clear, is the board looking for any possible expense reductions on the operating budget side to address that $130,000 piece of the budget, or is the board wanting staff to look further at utilizing fund balance for that to have no projected tax rate increase, or somewhere, or a split?
Split.
Yeah, my thought was try to harvest as much as we can without using it, but if we can't, we can't.
But I guess I'm looking at that question of, am I amiable to reductions in the capital budget? And the answer is yes.
So we will, I'll have staff take a look and see if there's any other operating expenses that we can trim back further, and then we can report that back to the board and then kind of show what the full picture is with the fund balance component to make up the difference. Okay.
Good.
All right. Well, thank you. That's not a pleasant task you have in front of you.
Right. All right.
We can new though, Eric. Thank God you're new and fresh.
Eric was born to do this.
Well, I've been telling everyone we will get through this, and
we will.
I applaud the town over the years to be in this financial position right now. Our colleagues around the state, I'm sure many are facing much. This is a challenging task, but much steeper.
Yeah, we do need to recognize that our woes are probably not nearly as bad as other communities.
Sure.
So can I ask a question maybe in a different way? And
of course,
you probably don't want to hear this. So if we came back with a much smaller increase in the tax rate, if we really are having a hard time finding the 100,000, is any level acceptable to you?
Come back with whatever you have to come back with.
Okay.
Simple answer is yes.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll make a menu of options next Tuesday.
I don't think it'll be a big menu, Eric.
It'll have to be a takeout order though. These days. I think we can then move on to manager's report.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Shirley.
There we go. I know it's getting late. So a couple things I'll mention for the board this evening. You have a copy of a letter the Conservation Commission received regarding the Boomhauer parcel, and some exciting development, potential news here for the town. Dan Boomhauer discussed with the commission the town acquiring 110 acres of development rights, abutting Sucker Brook Hollow Country Park. The initial reaction from the commission was very supportive, and we'll mention this project's in the early stages with Vermont Land Trust as a partner. Request that may be coming forward to the town is to fund the legal and administrative component for this project. And if things progress here, the board may see a formal request to use environmental reserve funds for that purpose in the future, perhaps later this year. Now, also mention the fire department's transition to an online burn permit system that went live online New Year's Day. So far, good feedback the chiefs relayed to me, and for residents, if they don't have online access or would prefer to call the fire station, that's very much an option as well. Call the station, and someone will enter in the request for the resident. And this shift alleviates what we'd use staff to go on site to investigate and taking staff out of the station. So the chief set up a good system here to add some technology for that service.
Okay, and Eric, do you know just briefly what does the online permit extend to? Small ceremonial fires, are they included in this?
I would have to check what our ordinance looks like, Jeff, but we can check with the chief tomorrow and get back to you.
Or I can go online and look myself.
And then I will. Any other question on that item?
No.
One policy issue to bring the board's attention. I spoke to Terry about this earlier, but the Oakview Trail in town adjacent to the Isham Farm, there's been an ongoing issue with dogs being off leash. This is a private easement for just trail use over the property, and it's affecting the land stewardship on this private property outside the trail easement. So the policy item for the board to look at here, and likely the short term, is consider changing allowed uses to no longer allow dogs on the property. It's been a lot of signs and efforts by the landowner to prevent this, and it's becoming a real concern and ongoing issue. And another concern is future public access and the town's ability to use this easement over the private property may be in jeopardy long term. So it's an issue we felt the board should discuss here in the short term.
Are you going to schedule that for a future meeting?
Yeah, I'll speak with Terry and coordinate with Melinda, but I'll get this before the board rather quickly. That's all I have for my manager's report this evening, Terry.
Thank you, Eric. So under other business, Eric and I were chatting about the town report dedication that we usually do each year. And he has an idea, but he will be sending out to all of us the current list that we have had over the years of people who may be considered for this, as well as another idea that he has in mind. And if you would get back to him, do not copy out all on your response, send it only to Eric as far as what your request would be, and we can take this up at the next meeting, I hope.
Okay.
Any other business before we consider the legal suit?
Just something quick. Earlier tonight when Tim Fair was talking to us, and we're going to discuss that, I guess, at the next meeting. Yes. Is it possible to ask if he can participate in that discussion? I had questions for him, and I didn't have a chance to ask him. I think his input might be helpful in helping me determine whether I think it's a good idea or not.
Yep.
All right, great. Thank you.
I'll reach out to him tomorrow.
Great. Thank you.
Any other business tonight? If not, then we could go on to the Williston versus the estate of Donald Bevins. Is there anybody here that needs to think about this in executive session, or are we pretty much set with what the dismissals talk about?
I don't mean to be a pain. I'm not sure I totally understand what is being proposed. So it might be worth going into executive session. So either Ted or Eric can quickly just set me straight on what's being proposed. I apologize for that. Does that make sense?
It does to me. I think, Ted, does that to you?
Sure. Yeah.
It should be very quick. I just want to make sure I understand what some of the wording being used means.
And the town attorney has done
I would
some
appreciate that as well.
modifications. Pardon me?
I would appreciate that as well.
Okay, then I would need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved. Is that okay? Enough?
Yeah,
Yes.
you have to invite.
And
I'll invite the town manager. And that's Shirley, you don't need to attend this, do you?
No,
Do you want to attend it?
She's done enough.
Yeah.
just Eric, I believe.
Sure.
So is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion say, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're in executive session. Thank you, Shirley. You're gone. We need to change, I believe now.
Yep. I
adjourned.